everyone. We're here with a very unusual celebration of the recently announced agreement between the government of Iran and the 6 parties, wherein the United States undertakes to lift the brutal economic sanctions that have taken so much of a toll against the people of Iran. Additionally, the agreement calls for Iran to eliminate something that never existed, an actual nuclear weapons program. Iran did not have such a program. Ayatollah Khomeini made a fatwa originally that nuclear weapons were illegal and Iran would not undertake or possess those weapons. The current leadership has said the same thing. And international experts have investigated the Iranian nuclear program and declared it to be peaceful and that there is no activity of producing nuclear weapons. So I'm telling you that that's a sham. Other people may have other information to share. The fact is the United States has finally agreed to lift the economic sanctions in exchange for an agreement that had many terms. I'll pass the mic and many people will talk about it, but this is a day of progress for humanity. This is a day in which the brutal economic sanctions have been lifted. This is a day in which we can reaffirm the principle of a nuclear weapons-free world, and that's something that our government should adhere to. We have been calling other governments nuclear transgressors when this is the only government that has ever killed huge numbers of people with a nuclear bomb. We're the only nuclear aggressor in the world in this country. And so today and this week, the world is closer to being free of the scourge of nuclear weapons. And thankfully, the world is closer to being free of the scourge of economic sanctions, which very truthfully have been more deadly in this century than nuclear weapons have been. Economic sanctions have killed huge numbers of people, in the neighborhood of millions of people, in round numbers. The preferred technique of the hegemony for subjugating and destroying other countries. That is why economic sanctions were imposed on Iraq. That is why economic sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe, for that matter. That is why economic sanctions were imposed on Iran. And thankfully, through the fortitude of many negotiations, we're at a stage today where the scourge of economic sanctions are going to be lifted according to a timetable, freeing the country of Iran from that actually genocidal apparatus that the United States uses. And this is a week where the world is closer to a type of freedom from nuclear war. I'll pass along the mic. I'd like to mention as well, the United States actually has reactivated a new Cold War against Russia. The United States has done that. So at the same time that we celebrate the fact that the world is closer to being free from nuclear weapons, with Iran making a public declaration that the world should be free of nuclear weapons and that they have always announced that they will not support them. At the same time that's happening, we have very much work to do. This is a day of celebration. Let me pass the microphone. We'll be here from 1 to 2 o'clock. The groups present here, this is a coalition. You'll see the usual people from the Committee for Peace and Human Rights. We're here on Saturdays. You will see that Mass Peace Action is here, the American Friends Service Committee, and other groups are here. And I'm going to pass the microphone along. Cole, would you like to speak?
Well, after years of sanctions, suspicion, war threats, and negotiations, 6 world powers and Iran announced a comprehensive deal on Tuesday to resolve disputes over Iran's nuclear program and to roll back sanctions. Massachusetts Peace Action welcomes the deal. That deal will reassure those who feared Iran might build a nuclear bomb. It will also eliminate unjust sanctions which have seriously harmed the Iranian people. And it will create a promising new climate for reconciliation and respect between Iran, across the Middle East, and the West. This deal shows that diplomacy, not sanctions and war, are the path to resolve differences in international relations.
My name is Joseph Gerson. I work with the American Friends Service Committee, which is a Quaker-based justice and peace organization. It has the Nobel Peace Prize. I work very closely with the Japanese and other international movements for nuclear disarmament. And as Cole was saying, in May, the United States brought down the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference because of its refusal to accept the demand and actually the promise of more than 20 years to convene a international conference to move toward a nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. We read in part from a statement that AFSC has been developing that will be going out to tens of thousands of people in the course of the next week. The bottom line in all of this is that we have to press our members of Congress, we have to call our senators, we have to call our congressional representatives, urging that they support this deal. We may not win in the first vote, but we can certainly build the support that can prevent any overriding of a presidential veto. The international deal regarding Iran's nuclear program shows that diplomacy and dialogue can work. As we've heard over the last months, as we came down to the end, the choices were either moving to a negotiated settlement or facing the possibility of regional and potentially international war. In substance and in form, it is a hopeful and affirming agreement. It demonstrates that multilateral dialogue can replace unilateral action, and that shared interests can be far better than economic coercion. For the first time in 3 decades, a more respectful relationship between the United States and Iran seems possible. And think about what all that militarization has cost in terms of our lives and our communities, in terms of hospitals, in terms of education that children don't get, the books that they don't get, the hospitals that aren't there, the housing that's not there, the transportation, and our infrastructure, which is increasingly that of a second-class nation. Most importantly, the agreement should be seen as a stepping stone toward ending the double standards of nuclear haves and have-nots, which has been the driving force of nuclear weapons proliferation. Years ago, Joseph Rotblat, the one senior scientist who had the moral vision to quit the Manhattan Project, said that humanity faces a stark choice. We can either completely eliminate the world's nuclear weapons, or we will see their proliferation and ultimate destruction of humanity. And he said, well, why? Why is because no nation will long tolerate what it perceives to be an unjust hierarchy of power and coercion and of nuclear terrorism.